Jewish history of Mexico. Nobody cares about her being Jewish. Baseball game, Jewish and Italian team elected a Jewish president. Jews in 1920s Iraq. Jewish man from the lost territory of Alsace.
Hello and welcome back to Horseshoe Theory, the least anti-Semitic podcast on the internet. Today our guest is Sam Aronow, an actor and Jewish history YouTuber. Sam flew in from Pasadena, California to visit Toronto and the studio. His neighborhood was heavily affected by the Eaton fire, so we opened the podcast talking about how you can help provide aid to the area. We must admit, we're a bit over our heads with this one. A lot was said about historical events that we have no context of, as Greg and I are just too cerebral to focus on data points. It was still a fun podcast, and I'm sure the higher IQ among you will get something out of this. If you want to hear this full episode, participate in the guest Q&A, get exclusive episodes, and your name in the credits, join the Patreon down below. With that, we are pleased to bring you Sam Aronow.
It's funny, it's always fun when we're like talking beforehand. Because you're like, I didn't talk to you much when you came in the other night, but everything I've heard you say or like any conversation we've had, you're like a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, it's awful.
Just from like studying history or?
I mean, history has always been the window that sort of gets me into any interest. I think it started when I was...
Oh yeah, just try to give it like 3 inches, sorry. Because you asked that, I didn't answer, but yeah, just like 3 inches away from your face when you talk.
Is this good?
A little bit closer. Yeah, right around there.
Yeah, I think history has just been the window through which I sort of take any interest in anything. I mean, I can think of a lot of the things like film, my major is in film, television, which was kind of actually my first love. I was more familiar with that. Like any of my sports fandoms, that kind of thing. And anywhere I go, I just kind of want to know how things ended up the way they were.
Yeah. And this is your first time in Toronto, right?
This isn't actually my first time in Toronto, but it is my first, like of any length. I've kind of come back and forth on the way to somewhere else, usually London. So it was not very long. It was like a one night layover.
Yeah, no, and you've been exploring. I don't know, you were just talking about Christy Pitts and all these like this history I'd never heard of.
Yeah, well, that's the reason I'm in Canada is because back in September I decided to do a special on the Jewish history of Mexico because Mexico had just elected a Jewish president, and you should see my comments. It's like 50%. This is a terrible American thing you're doing, even drawing attention to it. We're all Mexicans here. Nobody cares about her being Jewish. And the other 50% are Mexican Nazis who very much care.
They very much care about her being Jewish.
So while I was working on that, I didn't want to be super obvious, but I did make certain hints that I was doing Mexico as the next special. Because usually I go in chronological order, but often there will be places that sort of fall outside the normal conversation of Jewish history, which is very much sort of West Asia, North Africa, Europe, US. Nobody figured out in advance that it was Mexico. But once I did Mexico, everybody assumed that the next one would be Canada. And I figured, yeah, why not?
Oh, cool.
So I was in Montreal first, and so I've been collecting B-roll. I've been visiting historic sites. This is a little more relaxed than what I was doing in Mexico. Just because there's a lot less sort of, like information is not, there's like the Jewish Public Library here in Toronto, it doesn't exist anymore. So it is kind of a matter of just finding what I can find rather than going to some information clearinghouse.
Where have you explored so far?
Here? Well, not far from here. I went to the Kieverschule, which was closed. I think that's the oldest Orthodox synagogue in Toronto, because Jewish Orthodoxy actually was pretty late to arrive to North America. And this area, like from Kensington Market westward, seems to have been like one of the original Jewish areas of Toronto.
Okay.
So there's a lot to sort of unpack there. But most of like the real like intense stuff was in Montreal, because for a long time, much more of the Jewish population was located there. It's obviously changed, but historically, there's more of the history there, whereas there's more of the present here.
That makes sense. I follow that. And you're from Pasadena, which you wanted to talk about right away.
Yeah, well, it's funny because the night that I left for Canada for this work trip was the night that the fire started, and I considered many times canceling. even though it was way too late to get any sort of recompense. It obviously doesn't matter, but things are very much up in the air over there. I went through all my, friends, family, neighbors who were on sort of the other side of the 210 and made sure that they were safe, they were ready to evacuate, and most of them had either already evacuated or were just waiting for the order, and that's good. Now that containment has begun, I'm going to be working with some people. I have some friends in medium places, some sort of local community, sort of safety, quality of life activists. The synagogue, which was obviously one of the first places to be destroyed, going to be doing some reconnecting with them and getting things together. And I would highly encourage people to check out Team Rubicon. I have a friend who does that. They also have like chapters in Canada as well. So this is like a combat veterans disaster relief organization. When I first heard about it, my friend was running medical supplies into Ukraine from Poland.
Oh, wow.
They were doing stuff with the hurricanes in North Carolina this past fall, and now they're active dealing with the fires. Other stuff, I think the Pasadena Humane Society, they've been doing a lot of great things with, pets and animals and stuff. It's really chaotic, and they're doing some sort of they're doing some kind of unsung work over there.
Yeah.
And of course, the Union Rescue Mission, who's been in Pasadena forever, dealing with like homelessness and food insecurity for my whole life. It has been a little frustrating to see how the media coverage has been. U.S. media, from what I can tell, and also Canadian media, what I've seen of it, has tended to focus on the Palisades fire at the expense of the Eaton fire. And it's gotten this sort of image because the people there are rich and famous, they get more attention. But it also creates this perception that those are the only people being affected. But the thing about Pasadena is it's the parts that most people see is the very rich and white areas that are on the sort of south and far west, because those are the areas you get to when you arrive from LA. But where most people actually live is on this like 1/3 of the city that's much denser, and it's to the north of the freeway, which most people never see, and that's the area that's been affected. Altadena, which is a suburb of Pasadena immediately to the north, it's effectively the same place, has mostly been destroyed. This is a mostly working class community of 40,000 people, more or less. And though the fire itself, the Eaton fire, has been smaller in acreage than the Palisades fire, where it has been much more destructive and left a lot more people. Watching it while I went, it was really heartbreaking. The synagogue was obviously destroyed. My elementary school, the dive bar that used to be a train station for this like famous mountain railway back before the 30s that had all these tickets and posters, is completely destroyed, where I had my first job. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I do have family friends who have simply lost their homes. No shortage of acquaintances. It looks like Katrina, but instead of water, it's fire, honestly. And instead of low ground, it's the high ground. So I've been coordinating as I'm traveling, and since this will be coming out about a week after it records, there'll be a lot more information available to people. The unfortunate thing is that the British media, specifically the BBC, has been a lot better at spotlighting Altadena. The problem is that they keep referring to it as the Altadena neighborhood of Northeast Los Angeles, which it isn't. The thing people need to understand is that Pasadena is like a fully separate city. It used to be one of the largest cities in California. It just we even have a different accent, which is more sort of Great Lakes-ish than California. And it just happens to be really close. So I lived in Israel for 6 years, and I also saw them talk about how LA never got interested in public transit, which is not the truth. It was built on it, and then they got rid of it. So I'm used to the BBC not knowing anything about other countries, but they wouldn't say the Bradford neighborhood of Leeds, if you will.
Yeah.
It's been very frustrating. But aside from all that, I think, it's going to be time to sort of get back and get involved in the community. I know a lot of people who didn't really have that much to do with each other, and it's really been heartening to see people come together. It's been unfortunate to see some scammers pretend to be aid workers and steal stuff, but
Jesus Christ.
And of course, the conspiracy theories that have already flared up about how this only happened because white supremacy failed.
Yeah.
People, like yesterday morning, I woke up to a comment saying that this is all my fault and I deserve no pity because I'm Jewish and I'm the reason this happened.
Is that a space laser thing, or I mean, whatever?
Direct energy weapons.
I think it's a great replacement thing. People are
Oh, I
obsessed
see.
with California being a failed state because it's too diverse.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's that also.
But also, you're just going to make Californians angrier. Like, I feel like people are trying to win over Californians by insulting them, and that's not how it works. But I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It's exhausting, especially like the past week, seeing it all on Twitter. Like I'm on Twitter constantly, and it's just fucking. It just you're like fuck. Like I'm sick of like seeing all these.
What did you say?
Just I don't know, just like conspiracy theories and like.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, like Alex Jones is a new tweet like every hour that's just like all it does is retract from any possible solution or like aid work or anything. It's just exhausting.
And the algorithms apparently are very successful at like twisting people's minds. Vlad Vexler has been on his high horse about how an eco-fascist movement is coming, how there's going to be like only white supremacy can save the planet kind of movement. It's already sort of, we're seeing the seeds of it in places like Denmark already, but he thinks it's going to peak in like 10 years.
Fascinating.
And the idea from their perspective is, I suppose, if you limit refugees, immigrants, then you'll get less climate change.
Well, the idea is that the only people who are qualified to lead are white people.
Right. So
now that decolonization is why all of these bad things are happening, because non-white people can't take care of themselves.
Okay.
That's basically the idea.
Right. And so it's an argument about mismanagement in terms of.
It's their idea of mismanagement, because like so much of this comes from media. I was in Mexico. I mean, and people like aren't you scared? I'm like, no, it's fine. Like there are danger spots, there are criminal elements, but it's not existing in a world of criminal anarchy. This isn't even on the level of Russia in the 90s. And people say the same things about Chicago, where my family's from, and they say it about San Francisco, where I lived for 2 years. Yeah, it's like they talk about it like crime is down and homelessness is down. Where and when it's happening is changed, but like we are seeing decline. I don't want to get into it.
Yeah.
This is a dark place, and I'm not interested in making people feel bad.
Yeah,
least
fair
of all
enough.
myself.
Looking forward to obviously the dust hasn't settled yet, but what do you imagine the situation will be like post fires recovery?
I'm not gonna pretend to make any predictions. I never really thought about what would happen here, but I think we may see some restructuring. One of the big things is Altadena has always resisted becoming a formal part of Pasadena, which is one of the reasons it stopped increasing in population. There's a lot of unincorporated county areas, and it's because of property taxes, but they might not have that option anymore. And we might also see the breakup of the counties of Southern California, which are very big and not really reflective of culture or management. Like LA County is effectively administered as like 7 or 8 separate counties because there are these superior courts that are all over the place, and it's a little silly.
Don't they have really weird boundaries as well? Doesn't Orange County have like a border that just is a highway? Am I making that up?
You're making that up.
Isn't there? I thought there was one.
Orange County is it's the smallest one in Southern California, but we have 10 counties where you would normally expect to find like 40.
Okay. Yeah, LA is like remarkably big.
It really isn't. Like the metro area is a lot smaller than you'd think, but because the county lines go so far beyond it, everything that's in those lines counts.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm from a very small town, so in my mind, like,
they have the fires on Google Maps. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but they're not going to show the range. There's a website called Watch Duty, which is a nonprofit. They have really good, like, fresh updates on the information. They show the burn areas, they show the evacuation areas, they show potential evacuation areas. It's been super helpful.
Interesting.
I've had a tab open the entire time since the fire began. It's how I was able to stay coordinated. And yeah, it's good work.
Right. So as of now, the containment has begun?
Yes, containment, last I checked, was last night, admittedly. But the Eden fire, which is the big one on the right there. No, not that far right. The big one. keep going.
The one next to it.
Eden Fire, that one.
Yeah, Eden Fire. Okay.
That's 33%, I believe now.
Right.
Contains?
So yeah, that's Altadena. Everything that's in red is Altadena, and everything that's in darker red is what's been
I see.
burned.
Jesus Christ. Oh my God, man.
And the media is not paying as much attention to that because
North American media isn't paying as much attention to that, and it's gotten to like a ridiculous position where people have texted me asking, "Oh, you live near the Palisades?"
yeah,
Because
right.
it's almost like people don't realize it's not even just one fire.
Yeah.
So in the Palisades fire is affecting more of the rich people.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's mostly mountain and park area with like some very wealthy suburbs in the mix. It's an area that I don't know very well because it's actually pretty far away.
Right. I just see the articles of like, fire. Which Hollywood stars have been affected by the fire?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Right. Yeah, you're not gonna see that. I mean, the BBC, bless them, they still call it a tight-knit neighborhood of LA, which again, it's like calling Oshawa a neighborhood of Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have talked to people from Altadena, people who aren't rich and famous, and
So wait, which medias are covering it appropriately?
neither. I haven't. Local, insofar as it still exists, local media. You kind of have to pick and choose, to be perfectly honest. But now that containment has begun, there can be more coordination. It's going to be really interesting to see how the community comes together. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because right now, the fire is still ongoing. We're a week out. We don't really know what's going to happen. And we especially don't know what's going to happen in the rebuild, things like zoning, how this is going to affect the tone of the housing crisis in California.
Yeah, I have a friend who visits LA. You met her. And she was very concerned about how that's going to affect her being able to if she wants to come back at a place.
Landlords have been jacking up rents on the destroyed homes.
Right. How do you
Which is
jack up
illegal, by the way.
How do you,
in California, that is illegal.
How do you even charge rent?
It's
for
like
a
$1 million
destroyed
fine.
home. How do you charge rent for a place that's destroyed? You can't live there.
These assholes find a way. That's all. That's all there is to say about it.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's you should be the insurance company thing.
Yeah, the insurance company is pulling out a few months before the fires began.
Yeah, and which is also, I believe, illegal in California. But don't quote me on that.
I know, and I did see that they also blocked some insurance companies from canceling coverage after the fire as well.
My hope would be that this would bring a lot more attention to those kinds of abuses, which have been happening with regularity without a disaster. But now that so many people are affected, and especially with the Palisades fire, so many people of note have been affected by it. It's going there's going to be a lot more political pressure to sort of improve enforcement and sort of reconsider where we go forward from this.
Did you ever have any expectation that anything like this would ever happen?
Oh boy. You hear about these things and they generally happen it is the wilds, or it is sort of those kind of cabin communities that are sort of mixed in with the forest. But then again, Pasadena kind of is like an artificial canopy forest over a city, if you've ever been there. It is it's just under tree cover most of the city. And it's something that, we've been very proud of.
Right.
But it is also a different kind of tree scenario. It's bad. It's fucking climate change.
Yeah.
Let's get real. And people are trying to stop climate change for causing it.
Yeah.
Because whatever.
Well, that was the idea, it's democratic mismanagement, but it's not like the Republicans would have invested into climate
Well, no, because
change.
here's the thing. People talk shit about Democrats for California's problems, but most of those problems, from homelessness, from mental health, from housing restrictions, most of that goes back to the governments of Ronald Reagan in the late 60s and early 70s, and Pete Wilson in the 90s, and those are Republicans. And that's back because when I was a kid, California was still a swing state, and then people voted to try to basically ban the Spanish language, and that's why it isn't anymore. So really, the only reason Republicans talk shit about California is because it's not winnable for them anymore.
Right.
That's the switch that flipped, and I remember that when I was a kid.
Interesting.
Because you don't have to like pander to them to win in like 1992 or 1996. You just have to talk about how horrible it is, and often like very much exaggerate and talk about how it's awful because of gays and black people and Jews and whatever.
Yeah, it is. It's so sad. I mean, even in Toronto, when I moved here, I had a negative connotation of it. And then the amount of stuff I see on the internet about people just like showing the worst of Toronto. And it's like I live here. I go for like 2-hour walks every day. I lived there for 2 years. Like, it's not, I never feel unsafe.
This is very foreign to me as an American, because I feel like we in the U.S. have internalized a lot of your Pollyanna bullshit about how Canada is so much more progressive than the U.S., which, I mean, on a very few specific issues is true, but most of Canada's problems are also America's problems.
Yeah.
So I always had this image of like Toronto as this very sort of clean. This isn't necessarily a good thing. We have this idea of Canada as being this very clean, very wealthy, prosperous, boring place with no major cities or crime or any culture except for boring white people, as Todd in the Shadows once said. And I don't think that's necessarily good for Canada. It actually kind of puts a highlight on some of the things going on in Canada with the election that's coming, because I don't want to get controversial, but I've always, the way that, because I give me a moment. I've learned a lot about Canada from JJ, but I also think I've learned a lot from him that he doesn't realize himself.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So like
Makes
you're
perfect
anti-cent. That's why I asked you if you were from Western Canada, because of your obsessive anti-centrism. Because to me, the Liberal Party, and specifically this era of the Liberal Party, doesn't really have any agenda other than, well, one of the differences between Canada and the US, and Canada defining itself in opposition to the US, is that Canada like internalized the British class system more than any other part of the empire. So you have like an aristocracy, and it's actually an empowered aristocracy, and he's kind of part of it. We obviously have like rich people and political dynasties in the US, but like in Canada, there are certain people, and they're not generally the richest people, who are like born and raised with the expectation that they will be in politics.
Right.
You have a House of Lords.
Yeah, JJ's an aristocrat. There you go.
You have a House of Lords, and you call it the Senate. And it seems to me that most of Justin Trudeau's political capital has been spent defending the existence of that under this sort of very thin veneer of performative protectionism and progressivism, with no real agenda. And I suspect that's why the party, it just seems like such a fundamentally Eastern party. It's a very like Ontarian and Anglo-Quebecer conception of Canada as a place that is like inherently progressive without having to do anything to be progressive.
Yeah.
There's a great video on the last election by a fantastic smaller channel called Sarcasmatron. He did a whole big thing about like how Putin lost his mind, but he also did a very short and silly video about the last Canadian election, where he said that Trudeau's what Trudeau offers and what people want from him is cheap grace. It's the ability to make the, what is it what he said? He said to make the path of least resistance seem brave. And the thing is that like people get sick of that.
Yeah, that's very apt. Yeah,
because it's not just the conservatives, right? Because like that's why you have like in the West, it's basically the conservatives and the NDP, and that isn't new either. That's not a function of this electoral cycle where the liberals are doing so terribly. An American commenting on Canadian politics. You love to see it.
You love to see it. Well, I am far west, but I'm also far east. Yeah, I'm going to vote for the Bloc Québécois to accelerate the provincial breakup so that we get annexed easier.
I would love to see.
pick us out in
I would
pieces.
love to see the Bloc Québécois candidate for Christy Freeland's seat,
Yeah, that'd be
which
great.
is where we are.
That'd be awesome. And because imagine a Westerner voting Bloc Québécois in solidarity against Ottawa and the Laurentian elites.
Well, I've heard from the nature of my visit to Toronto has been very different from the nature of my visit to Montreal. It's more hanging out with friends in
Yeah.
Montreal, and I hear that there's actually, JJ notwithstanding, a real affinity between Quebecois and British Columbians in sort of mutually not bothering with Ontario's bullshit.
This is anti-centrism.
Yeah.
This is a longitudinal anti-centrism in action. The far west, the far east.
Yeah.
I'd love to meet some people from the Maritimes to see what they think about that.
Well, that's off the compass. We don't. Like,
Yeah.
You're so far east where we don't even consider it.
That's where I'm born and raised in Nova Scotia. It's
Okay.
doesn't matter. our opinions, our perspectives are just completely irrelevant.
Well, it seems the way Canadian government works, in my eyes, it seems like the wants and needs of any particular part of the country are irrelevant, which is why it's so hard to do anything at the federal level.
Yeah.
The Ottawa was like, we shouldn't export energy to the States after the Trump stuff happened. And then Alberta Premier was just like, no, we're going to keep doing that. So
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. Is like the needs are so drastically different.
Even like in areas that should seem simple, like the economy, what economic solutions mean to someone in Nova Scotia is so different from what it means to someone in BC.
Yeah.
That's why we're going to get annexed within our lifetimes.
No, I actually think Canada would win a war against the United States.
Yeah, really? With our Mounties?
Perhaps you've not seen Canadians at war, but it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're all pent up. We're all energized. We all shove it down, compartmentalize it.
1812?
Vimy Ridge.
Sure.
Forget 1812, World War II, Korea, Afghanistan, probably.
Yeah. It'd be interesting.
Leo Major.
It'd be interesting to see how many average Canadians would be willing to go to war.
6.
Six?
Well, I looked at the polls of how people feel about this whole fucking stupid discussion, and I saw that even like the Conservatives, and even Alberta, it's like 19% pro annexation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
there's
sense.
a meme going around. It's like 13% people said that they would be pro annexation, and then the meme is like the 13% is just JJ McCullough's face.
Here's the thing. I need to defend JJ because JJ is not pro annexation. He is just opposed to the like cultural binary that Canadians often take, where either they are fixated on being superior to the US or they are solely interested in what goes on in the US at the expense of anything that happens in Canada.
Yes, and anti the, what did you call it, Pollyanna?
I suppose I did.
Yeah.
It's all kind of going out. Once it's out of my mouth, I forget it.
Yes, you did say it was painful to have as much knowledge as you do, to be the encyclopedia. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad that he defended JJ there, so I'm just going to let that hang.
Yeah.
I think JJ is pro annexation. I think he's pro Day of the Rake, as they call it, when the Leafs get raked in by America.
I think he's pro integration, because or at least acknowledging the level of integration that already exists.
Yeah.
And like not being super patient with people who pretend it hasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
it's
do
like you were
think
saying, Canada's problems are America's problems.
I am not pro annexation. I don't think we have any reason. I saw a soldier while I was changing trains in Ottawa on the way here, and I walked up to him and said, I just want to say as an American, it's not us, it's just him. We don't get it. Because I think in Canada there is a certain paranoid, fringe, like horseshoe theory, if you will, fixation with the idea that the U.S. has always harbored a desire to conquer Canada. And I do remember having a conversation when I lived in Israel with an Israeli who didn't understand why we don't have this like Hungary level irredentist fixation. And I explained, well, much like Egypt after the Yom Kippur War, we get to pretend to win because it was the only way to get us to sign the peace treaty. And pretend that this was never what we wanted.
So you haven't done the Canada video yet, eh? You're still
No, that's actually gonna be a few months. I wanted to be here in the winter so I could be as stereotypical as possible. Some issues filming with that because talking about things that happen in the summer is kind of strange.
Yeah.
Filming Christy Pitts covered in snow.
Yeah. Well, that explains it. I mean, because originally when you said you wanted to come, it was for like live show purposes, and then you were like, no, it's for research purposes. So I was wondering what you were
Yeah, the live
researching.
show idea kind of like that's not the kind of channel that I have, I don't think, and it's very hard to find venues to do that.
Yeah.
Much more than I thought.
Yeah, no, that's the main hurdle for live shows. But we've been doing one every couple months around here. We found a venue that's good for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, you're here for research purposes.
Yeah, I'm here for research. I'm here to shoot B-roll. And I'm also here just to have a nice time. And
Cool.
I have been having a really nice time.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
We've been putting you up at the studio.
Did you have any misconceptions about Toronto before you came?
Well, I've been to Toronto before, and I'm not sure I had that many expectations to begin with, because I know Toronto, it's big, it's on the Great Lakes, it has the best Major League Baseball pitcher of the 1980s who never got any Cy Youngs and isn't in the Hall of Fame because Jack Morris is an asshole. It's Dave Stieb. Dave Stieb had the best WAR of the 80s as a pitcher. But I know it had I've been on the streetcars and the subway, and you have a lot of really good transport. But yeah, I didn't really have any expectations. So like what I've seen going around here hasn't really challenged anything that I thought about Toronto, but it's not a bad thing. I must say, Montreal seems a little bit more fun, but that might also be as much a function of what I'm doing here versus what the city itself is like.
That's always the case when you're going to a new city. Like you go to a city, you don't know anyone, you're like, this sucks. And it's like, that doesn't say anything about the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, my bubby's favorite city in Japan was Sendai, and her favorite city in Israel was Netanya, which are not super impressive cities.
Mm-hmm.
They're big, but I didn't really see what she was like so excited about, but it's because she knew people there.
Right.
Yeah.
So how is Christy Pitts related to your research? What's the story there?
Oh yeah, so I've already talked about this a bit in my Mexico video because something very similar happened in Mexico City in the 1930s. But during that decade, there were a lot of pro-Nazi putsches, coup attempts, basically riots, all over countries that ended up being on the side of the Allies. Like in my own backyard in L.A., the chief of police back in the 1930s, who's actually the father of shoot first techniques. He's kind of the father of modern American police brutality. James E. Davis had a plan to like wipe out the municipal government, go to Boyle Heights where most Jews lived with a machine gun, just kill everyone they saw, do public lynchings of all the famous Jews, and seize the armories up the coast and start a civil war with California as a Nazi puppet state, and was only stopped by a few bored do-gooders with nothing better to do. Because
Wait, when was this?
this was in 1938. And there was also the Garden Fight in New York, where the German-American Bund had a big Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden, and then they got in a giant fight with mobsters. And something very similar happened with a group called the Silver Shirts in Minneapolis. But, so this was what happened here was a baseball game between a mostly Jewish and Italian team and a team associated with a local church that was more closely aligned with the swastika gangs, or swastika clubs. These were mostly in Toronto. So they would like fly the Nazi logo at like vacation spots to discourage Jews from going there during the summer. And this became like this baseball game became like a huge riot with like 10,000 of these people.
In Christy Pitts?
Yeah. And the
Right outside.
Yeah.
10,000 person riot.
That's wild.
And
That's so wild.
What's interesting is that they tried to do the same thing in Winnipeg, and they were outnumbered 10-1 because Winnipeg apparently was apparently the most hostile place to Nazis in Canada, which is pretty cool.
Winnipeg is anti-fascist action.
Winnipeg, Winnipeg, Winnipeg. The forks beneath the forks beneath the forks.
That doesn't explain Jane. Jane's a benevolent fascist from Winnipeg.
Oh, true.
True. Damn.
So, any other spots you checked out in Toronto?
I kind of hung out downtown yesterday. I've been trying a bunch of different places at Kensington Market, or Kmart, as we've learned to call it.
Kmart,
On
yes.
JJ's recommendation, actually, I went on a tour of the provincial capital. That was pretty nice.
Like the provincial capital. The older building on Queen
Yeah.
and Bay? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny when like I have like no connection to Toronto or its history, and then like you come here and you just like 20 times what I know about the city I've lived in for 2 years.
True.
And I don't know that much.
I know that's
Yeah, you're just learning.
Yeah,
you're just
like, well,
researching.
yeah, because I'm doing this because it's my job. This is the curse, you see.
Yes.
And because I don't really like to talk about my work when I'm not doing it, but it's kind of an unpleasant habit.
Right.
Because what else am I doing? I work from home.
True. Your brain's filled with facts. They can't help but escape.
And yeah, I work alone, so I don't really have anyone to share them with, at least not face to face, which is very different from like doing it to an audience that you don't see.
Yeah, well, we're all the same. That's why we do this.
Yeah.
In-person stuff. So we become slightly less autistic.
yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, get the noise out of your head.
Yeah.
But it's still like history is when you realize how little you know about history, it just becomes like paralyzing. I feel like I used to have so much more hubris with my videos, and then especially meeting the people here who seem like so well educated, or like talking to JJ. Now I just feel like fuck, I'm so uneducated.
The more you know, the more you know you don't.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
good. That's okay. That's healthy.
Yeah.
Something that I've found really helpful, interestingly, is that my videos have mostly gone in chronological order. And I've noticed that a lot of channels that inspired me started by doing that, and then they gave up because it was too hard. But I find it really helpful because I'm kind of sort of building up, like reconstructing my reality, like, Rene Descartes. So like when I learn a new thing happen, I'm like, oh, that's because of this, and that's because of this, and these ideas are evolving, and they're like it's like strata. So I don't know why it's hard for other people. It is frustrating when I miss something that I should have covered and I didn't because I didn't know, because it only got referenced in retrospect. That's annoying. And another thing is like I was just not as good of a researcher. I was not as diligent. A lot of my earlier videos, and I think everybody goes through this a little bit just on a production level, were not as good. But also like when I got to World War I did I start doing footnotes, and that made me a much better YouTuber. I do think, a little over a year ago, we had kind of a reckoning with issues of plagiarism and making shit up.
Yeah.
You're from Nova Scotia, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
What, making shit up?
James Somerton was from Nova Scotia.
I didn't know that. I knew he lived here. I didn't know he was from Nova Scotia.
Yeah, he's kind of like a dark version of you.
I did not know James Somerton's from Nova Scotia. That's hilarious.
If you ate the wrong things.
We've wanted to get him on the podcast for so long, but
you shouldn't want that. But I think
it'd be fun.
I think it put a good scare into a lot of people. But I think the people that it scared were not the malicious actors. I think it was people who wanted to do good, and it made people work a lot harder. I had already started doing footnotes for World War I, and it's definitely made me a much better, more organized historian. It's made me a much better historian, and just the natural process, because I'm a film background. I brought a lot of that into what I do, even though it's mostly illustrations, and like the experiences made me a better filmmaker. Like often I will go into a video with no real thought for how something should look or feel, but sometimes I do. I think the Minag America one, which I did, and the ones I've done on the US, because they're so big, I kind of end up having a very specific aesthetic. Like, this is what we should be alluding to, recalling this sort of imagery, this sort of sound. But sometimes you just have to, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. Because a lot of the time, and even with things that I do have a clear vision, I don't know what conclusions I'm going to reach, because that's how research is supposed to work.
Yeah.
And I think that's really exciting, because I love when I go into research for a video with what little knowledge I've heard sort of through the really simplified popular culture view, and come away with a completely different conclusion. The Dreyfus Affair is like the one that sort of sits in my mind the most.
What's the Dreyfus Affair?
The Dreyfus Affair was basically a conspiracy by some German spies in the French army in the late 1890s to frame a Jewish man from the lost territory of Alsace for their crimes. And it lasted like 10 years. There was a big legal fight, big like media fight. And eventually he was exonerated. He actually came back to fight in World War I. And this was sort of at the end of a period in France where military culture was like, it might as well have been like late Imperial Japan. They loved killing each other and themselves. It was like this weird faux Roman honor culture thing. And like, it was so upsetting to them. It's like a whole long thing. And the thing I always heard, which ended up not being true at all, was that this was what inspired Herzl to start the Zionist movement, which is not true, partly because it wasn't what inspired him, and two, because the Zionist movement already existed for over a decade. You can watch my videos for more about that. But the thing but the main thing I heard was that it was like this reckoning for France, that they had not gotten as far in their social progress as they thought they had. But instead, the conclusion I came to was that this was like it. This was the final battle. This was the final battle over what France's political identity was. I think I called it the last battle of the long French Revolution. So even though he went through a lot of horrible shit, I came away like feeling like, oh, this was a triumphant thing. It's sort of like what my mom said about Watergate. A lot of younger people who were around during Watergate, who were like little kids, like to talk about, oh, it destroyed our innocence, which any tragedy that happens when you're a child, it destroys your innocence. And there's a danger in projecting that onto the entire country, which is why the myth of the conservative 1950s exists. But her thing, because she was like a young adult at the time, was like, no, because they got found out. That was a good thing. And I kind of ended up feeling the same way about the Dreyfus Affair, and I was really excited that I had come away with a new take that I didn't know existed when I went in. And it can be painful sometimes, but it can be really rewarding to make those discoveries. And that's kind of how I feel. I feel like I'm exploring.
Yeah.
And I feel like, because I'm learning these things most of the time, like 95% of everything I put out there is new information to me, and I'm doing it in this chronology. I'm reconstructing my reality. I have a completely different understanding of myself and how I ended up the way I am.
So chronology. So when you started the channel,
let's go to the bottom of his channel.
Boy.
We can see the chronology, because that's a very interesting. I wasn't aware that you do things chronologically. Like, that's very difficult. I can see why a lot of people just give up on.
But it's also it is helpful to me, and I don't know why. I know why certain people give up on it, but I'm surprised that more people don't stick to it because of the ways it has helped me.
Oh, you really do?
Oh, wow. We're back to BC.
We are to the bronze. We started the Bronze Age collapse, and right now we're up to the 1920s.
And the noble sand cat.
That's before I started.
Jewish prehistory. Wow.
Gods of Israel.
So did you just wanted to start doing this, basically? Do you have a background in history, like formally, or? Not
formally. It's just always been an interest of mine. My background was in film, and I actually moved to Israel in 2017 to work in the film industry there, which ended up being bad timing. But as soon as I landed, I started getting a lot more recommendations for history channels. And I saw that format as something that could be used to promote Jewish history in a way that it isn't, because it's scattered across so much geography and so much time. And I think there's also a perception that people who aren't Jewish wouldn't be interested. And I didn't, if like you step back and think about that alongside all these other niches, like, Italian history, British history, Japanese history, it's not strange that I take an interest in those things, even though I'm not any of those things.
Yeah.
So, why not Jewish history? I want people to feel like that Jewish history is interesting and relevant to them, even if they're not Jewish. And apparently it succeeded, because most of my viewers aren't, at least most of the like hardcore fan survey respondents, which suggests to me that most of the viewers overall aren't.
Wow.
I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, no, it is really amazing to put that much time into like learning history properly too. And especially like I have this huge issue with YouTube is like just producing, right? And producing all the time, I feel this strain between like how meticulous can I be with a project versus like at the end of the day I need to get workout, and if I don't get workout, the channel fails. And that's part of the reason why so many people just don't do any due diligence and just pump shit out. Like I used to do that. There's a ton of my old videos. I'm like, why the fuck would I say that?
Right,
It makes no sense.
Right, but you learned.
Yeah.
And we learned. And now we can pass that institutional knowledge and tradition onto people who are coming in now.
Yeah.
So that they don't have to go through that sort of embarrassment.
Yeah, it is embarrassing sometimes.
Do you think you'll ever catch up to the modern day?
I don't intend to ever catch up to the modern day, because it would at a certain point you're just covering things that were in the news a while ago,
Yeah.
and there's no new information and there's no new perspective. Like, what am I going to add to a story about something that happened 10 years ago? So my plan is to sort of cut myself off, like specials notwithstanding, where I do go up to the present day, cut myself off on my 18th birthday. And that at that point, the nature of the channel, as we get close to that, the nature of the channel will start to change. There'll be more specials, more food videos, more travel videos, and maybe I just will want to do other things, and I won't be under so much pressure to do exactly this,
Wait, 18th birthday of the channel, or your...
My 18th birthday.
Wait, how old are you?
I'm 35.
He's 14 years old. You don't...
I'm 35.
Okay.
So, basically 2007 would be like
Oh,
the convention.
sorry, I completely misunderstood what you were saying.
No, he's going to stop 13 years ago or whatever.
No, I thought, sorry, I
17, 20.
I'm like, Israel for 6 years. Like, are you 17? Sorry, I got confused there. Okay, I understand now.
No, that was 2017.
Okay.
You okay?
Yeah, no, you just said 18th birthday. I thought you were inferring either you were like under 18.
No, I'm on the older end of the history YouTubers, weirdly, with the Matts, Matt Beat and Matt Baker.
Yeah.
Matt Beat.
What's the history YouTuber scene like? We hung out with history YouTubers at VidCon a couple years ago.
I mean, I would say that most history YouTubers are not like really in touch with each other. So it's actually interesting, because collaboration, like explicit collaboration, doesn't really do what it used to.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a vehicle for promotion the way it used to be, which is why you see fewer crossover events than you did back in the teens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm on a few Slack channels with educational YouTubers, including history YouTubers. And there is a dedicated history YouTuber Slack. And most of what we do is like alert each other to like bullshit sponsors and, make fun of trolls and that sort of thing. But like the collaboration that we do, both with the people that are on there and some of the people that aren't, like at the time this video comes out, I'll have released my video on Jews in 1920s Iraq. And there will be a guest voice, and that's Jenny Draper, who does a bunch of history of London stuff, and she's a tour guide as well. She's great. That's more the kind of collaboration, not cross-promoting, but just helping each other out. And like that actually helps a lot more.
Yeah, I've seen that with video essays as well, just like reading a line or a quote.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of that myself as well. I used to work on this really tiny channel about the Civil War week by week, kind of like Indian Idol does, but about the Civil War. And I provided the voices pretty much every week of Jefferson Davis and General Sherman.
Man, I feel like it'd be so fun to do like a Halifax history channel or like a Nova Scotia history channel. Like just narrow in on something you could actually wrap your head around in a comprehensive way. That'd be so interesting.
Do it.
If I had the time, maybe that's a later project.
Yeah.
But right now I can't do it. But it would be so fascinating.
Life we chose where we've given ourselves so much job security that we can never do anything we want to now.
Yeah.
It's a good problem to have, to be fair.
Do you have a favorite moment in Jewish history from your channel that's like something you come back to a lot?
I don't. I mean, if you mean, do I go back and rewatch the videos? I don't, because like once I've been through every step of making them, so I don't really need to.
Yeah.
There were some that I spent many years knowing I would eventually do and looking forward to them. Probably the most notable is the Jewish perspective on the unification of Italy.
Huh.
Which there was a lot of it in the cause of Jewish emancipation, of giving Jews equal rights with other people in Italy, was very tied into the creation of a united Italy.
Oh.
And part of that was that the Jews were the personal property of the Pope in the Papal States.
Oh.
And there was a big international scandal where a nanny claimed to have baptized a Jewish child in secret, and by that he automatically became the adopted son of the Pope.
Oh.
And so his parents had no rights, and it was a big scandal, and that was one of the things that led into the Second Italian War of Independence. But it ended with the Italians taking Rome, and the Pope, who was Pius IX, I actually got this a little wrong in my video, because this is the version that everybody hears. But what actually happened was he put out a declaration that whichever officer ordered the first artillery barrage on Rome would be excommunicated from the Catholic Church. And what people have heard, what the folklore of it is, that they chose a Jewish artillery officer to order it. But what actually happened is that he just happened to be in that position already.
What position?
The head of the artillery in that.
Oh, I see. So they didn't pick him.
His name was Giacomo Segre. Yeah, and his son was a general in World War I.
And he was the first one to
order the artillery to shell Rome.
Wow.
When Rome fell to the Italians.
Interesting. Do you know anything about the Italian unification?
No, this is what I mean.
Another one is the Jewish perspective on the Russo-Japanese War, which is actually like Fiddler on the Roof. The musical is taking place during that, but it's never like addressed. But it is like a really important moment in Jewish history with like far-reaching ramifications that I don't think people have given that much thought to just in that specific context. But you can watch my video for that.
I gotta watch a ton of your videos.
Yeah, I'm real sorry.
What was the Jewish perspective on the Russo-Japanese War, just quickly?
I didn't even know there was a Russo-Japanese War.
I was thinking.
Well, so the Russo-Japanese War was basically the Emperor of Russia was becoming really, really unpopular because he had sort of broken the illusion that he was above politics. And then his cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm, encouraged him to go to war with Japan over control of Korea and Manchuria because you need to show that the white man is superior. And what ended up happening is that Japan, because the situation for Jews was so notoriously horrible in the Russian Empire, there were some like huge massacres that had happened right before that. The Japanese very overtly presented themselves as the liberators of Asians, among which they included Jews.
Right.
And so when the war ended up happening, Russia was completely destroyed. Like their navy was wiped out by the Japanese in like a month.
Damn.
It was like an incredibly lopsided victory, even though they had more people and they had better weapons. The Japanese had put a lot into communications technology. And this was what eventually led to, a few months later, the January Revolution, the 1905 Russian Revolution, which created the Duma, which activated a bunch of Orthodox priests mostly into a proto-fascist movement called the Black Hundreds that massacred like 5,000 Jews in like 10 days. And that's why my family fled to Kiev and then to Chicago.
Wow.
What do you think? I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this. People that are doing damage, you don't have to name any names, people that are doing damage to history and to credibility by making YouTube videos about it and just not doing their research.
Well, I mean, there's like the idiots who do like Atlantis shit, but I think what you mean is lazy people.
Yeah, lazy or people who kind of, I'm again from being outside of this, a big criticism I've heard from actual historians is this obsession with a bird's eye view on history, and people who don't actually look into like nitty gritty details, but just try to find patterns. And they're like, oh, this is like what causes civilizations to collapse, and this is what fixes them, and this is what all history
I know
is
who
on
you're talking about.
Yeah, maybe I have someone in mind, but also
I think that I think there's a spectrum, and I think there are people who have heard that criticism and are genuinely trying to improve. But I also think they're just like flat out content farmers, and and those people are not just doing that, but they're like stealing like scripts from other history YouTubers, some of which are actually like accredited, teachers of history, like the Cynical Historian. He's like a PhD, I believe, in the history of the American West, and he has had like videos stolen by large creators.
damn.
Video ideas. Well, not like, I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, he's been the subject of a lot of plagiarism, not like just copying and pasting, like reposting his stuff, but
Yeah, because history it's one of those things that people also like really casually engage with as just like background noise or entertainment, or like it is apt for content farms, right? The same way like YouTube drama is. It seems like there's a lot of history channels that just like pump shit out for the sake of producing like 3-hour videos every week.
Well, that's why I find it helpful to just sort of go ahead with this sort of format that I've developed, because and another thing that I do is I make corrections, which apparently destroys my analytics, because I'll make these videos that are sort of answering questions from patrons, and they are sort of making corrections that people point out in the comments, and I'll do a little research and like, okay, I'll mention that. This destroys my analytics because far fewer people watch them, and it means that sponsors, like, I don't think in the last 15 months I've gotten a sponsorship offer that wasn't a phishing attempt. And the ones I was getting before that weren't phishing attempts were like so disreputable and so low paying.
How is it destroying you're not re-uploading the videos, are you?
No, I'm making these like recap videos.
Oh, I see.
I'm talking about, okay, we've come to an end of like this section of videos.
and
Let's
then you
talk
correct
about
the,
some of the things. Yeah. And you, I think it's better to leave a trail of trust behind, to be honest with people.
Yeah, definitely. That's the reputation you want to build.
Even if it means I make like $9,000 to $10,000 less every year.
Right. Are you ever tempted to make one of these big picture sorts of videos based off the facts that you're learning, like a grand statement about, I don't know, some trends that pop up in Jewish history or something like that?
I'm not interested in grand statements. I don't think there is a lot of use for them. I think that like if you have this very utilitarian idea of history, I think you're not really understanding what that history means. I think a lot of people are insecure who are interested in history and try to make that practical argument. But instead of saying, well, we need to learn so we don't repeat, and like, no, you just need to understand why things are the way they are, why they happened the way they happened. That's what this is really about.
Right.
That's a fascinating perspective.
Because this is what made us, even if we weren't around yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is unique in our fields of we like wild positor schizos who are just like, they take 3 pieces of information and they go off.
Yeah. They use it to explain all of reality. But I do agree. I mean, projecting here, because I'm definitely insecure about what I know. People who are really into history, who are trying to use it to find those big picture things, it does come from insecurity.
Or they start with a big picture thing and they work backwards through history to try to make it.
Yeah, that's called revisionism. Actually, something that's really weird. Oftentimes, I like shadow ban these people immediately. I get comments from Nazis who are not like an insignificant percentage of my subscribers, I suspect, who are always accusing me of doing Israeli propaganda, which is almost like the opposite of what I'm doing. But anything that's Jewish and not anti-Semitic is apparently Israeli propaganda.
Right.
Even if it conflicts with prevailing Israeli political narratives.
It's 10% of your subscriber base up there.
You wish they dressed that well. You're the people who complain the most about that stuff are generally the most sloppy motherfuckers. Anyway, but also I've gotten very on occasion comments from Nazis who are thanking me for exposing the Jews because I'm not defending every Jewish individual who ever lived, because that's what they think history is. They think that the history exists for the purpose of revisionism, which is very funny, in my opinion.
Oh my God, man.
Right, like they would look at the Jews being pro-equality in Italy and say like, that's just how they are. They're always advocating for that wherever they are, something like that.
Well, no, like anytime I talk about a Jewish figure who is like not a good dude, they're like, he's opening people's eyes. He's gonna if people know how evil this one guy was, they'll realize how evil all Jews are.
Right. Have you seen Zoomer Historian?
I've seen thumbnails. I know he exists.
He's just
But like they
thing.
they think that history, the purpose of history, is to support your existing conclusions.
Right.
Which is sort of...
And it's so interesting to see someone like come out to you and make that statement without realizing what it says about them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure like most of these people are like fucking 12.
Well, it's a product of how much information we have access to. Like people will be like North Korea apologists, and they'll find...
Yeah, but that's always existed.
Yeah, but I feel like it's easier now, though. It's easier to... It's easier for someone to like have a grand like statement or something they agree with, that they kind of like inherently agree with, and then just find the right pieces to back it up in a way that, to someone who doesn't have the tools to combat them, creates a coherent argument.
Oh yeah, that's why we're in trouble right now.
Yeah.
And you can do it with anything.
No, yeah. If you know nothing about North Korea, and then I just approach you, and this is the first time you're hearing about like this story, and I have all the right information to say like, oh, why everyone's wrong about why North Korea is like actually the only worker-led democracy on the planet, right? Something like that. You'd be like, oh, okay, and wow. Unless you have the tools to fight against it, but it's happening with everything. It's really...
Yeah, it's way beyond history. It's way beyond... It's like everything.
Yeah.
Well,
Did I just turn this off?
Oh, yeah, you might have. It's fine.
Yeah.
My hand slipped.
You're good.
Yeah, it's still going. Well, what's more marketable, though? It's like, I just figured out something crazier. It's like...
Well, why is it more marketable? It's more marketable because everything is driven by algorithms instead of, personal customization or curation. It used to be, like, early Web 2.0, you could decide... like what you got alerted to. Early YouTube was more like that. The algorithm has perverse incentives, and that's the danger.
Yeah, like if I subscribe to something, first of all, it might not pop up in my subscription feed. Second of all, if you go to YouTube, it's immediately showing you the homepage of what he thinks you will like rather than your subscriptions.
Yeah.
And YouTube is on the better end of that spectrum.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine, like, thank God we're old enough to not be like get educated by TikTok. Like something I can't relate to at all, but I know it's like people, there's like 19-year-olds hearing about parts of history for the first time through, short form media on TikTok. Like that's where they get their information from. And far more alarming because it's like that's outrage is what wins every time.
I feel like we're going back down into like the dark space.
Yeah. We can...
I mean, there's nothing you can hear from us that you haven't heard, that if you're watching this, you haven't heard from a million other people.
It's true. Yeah. Anyone can complain about the algorithm.
The algorithm.
Algorithm bad.
Algorithm bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth reiterating sometimes, though.
Henry, do you have any questions about Jewish history? What are you pulling up right now?
As I recall, there were questions from patrons.
Yeah, we can pull those up.
I gotta grab
We've been going for an hour.
I gotta grab my phone, and then I can pull those up for you.
Wait, go. I want to see that thumbnail again.
I have I have an ending line if you wanna.
Do you want to actually keep
Yeah, let's do.
No. Afterward. I have it in mind.
Put it up on your phone. Just gotta pull the questions up there. I think we got a few good ones actually. Yeah, actually most of them were like pretty specific.
I'm just gonna tell
questions.
you, there's gonna be a moment.
A moment.
We're prepared.
Yeah.
If they have
we like
specific,
moments.
here's the thing: if they have specific questions about things I've said in my videos, that's gonna be trouble. I'm not an encyclopedia, actually. I am a human with a human brain.
Oh no, I thought you were an encyclopedia.
Switch to Patron there. You should say now actually, because right now is the point where we like after it's the YouTube version cuts here, and then the rest will be uploaded on Patreon. Yeah. So if you have a closing statement for the YouTube audience.
Well, thank you for having me. I can't wait to see how much of this is usable.